My hair is horrible. God.
No worries, Roseanne. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to announce the birth of a new show called The Pew. And we have somewhere in her hairdo, Roseanne. And we have Reverend David with his mighty hat on.
I should have worn a hat.
And then we have, of course, from Jerusalem with his traditional Lowell. Hello, Lowell.
Hello.
Hi.
So today we're going to be discussing an very interesting topic, I think, which is a little bit in need of a particular presentation, let's say, because this is a little bit the age of the liberal Antichrist. Joseph Roth wrote in his novel from 1934, at the time of totalitarianism, which was the 30s, the Antichrist has come, clothed in such a way that we, who have become accustomed to waiting for him for years, do not recognize him. He already dwells in our midst, within ourselves, and the heavy burden of his ignoble wings weigh upon us. For a long time, he has been spreading poison in the innocent souls of our children, but we do not notice. And of course, in the last few days on my website, I have published articles that really show how liberals are trying to mine in every way possible Christianity, but they do the same also with Judaism. I actually picked up on an article from a couple of years ago where there were two prominent authors of the Jewish community inviting to wage war against Donald J. Trump. And of course, we know why. These two authors are Michael Cabon and his wife, Ayet Valdam, who wrote, "Any Jew anywhere who does not act to oppose President Donald J. Trump and his administration act in favor of anti-Semitism. Any Jew who does not condemn the president directly and by name for his racism, white supremacy, intolerance, and Jew hatred condones all of those things." And we know that to be a complete lie. That's why we have on our panel two eminent representatives of the Jewish community like Roseanne, Barr, and Lowell. So I will kickstart, of course, also with another article that I wrote about the Jesus wearing high heels surrounded by drag queens on an altarpiece in the Church of Sweden. What's that all about, Reverend David? Why they are disrespecting and mining the figure of Jesus? And then we're going to take on also the subject in regards to Judaism. Why mining religion so much? Why is it so important for these liberals?
Gosh, I mean, am I a one-issue liberal? Somebody called me that during the week. You're a one-issue liberal, David. I mean, so I think it's something to do with the fact we've lost a sense of metaphysics. We've lost a sense of the supernatural. You know, I wrote a play on Albert Schweitzer, which was actually premiered at the British House of Lords. I think he's an amazing man, but he's one of the people responsible for the total humanization of the figure of Jesus Christ. You know, is Jesus the man, Jesus the Jew, an absolutely gripping subject? Of course it is. But if you're a Christian, you must accept somewhere or other that there is more to that figure than humanity. Otherwise, you are a Jew or you're a Muslim. And you know me, Leo, don't shout at me. You know, for me, that's fine because we're all the children of Abraham. But a Christian of any description must ultimately say somewhere there is a supernatural, there is a metaphysical, there's a transcendental connection. Therefore, what seems on the surface to be very affirming of minorities and affirming of, you know, the people that need bonding together, I think reeks of something much more sinister and something much sadder. Hi, John. You know, I mean, what seems on the surface, you know, I like those awfully kitsch paintings of Jesus amongst the poor of London. You know, they're chocolate boxy, but they're rather nice. And, you know, Jesus as the Victorian homeless guy, I think that's lovely. And so on the surface, Jesus, Jesus amongst transsexuals, transgendered people, that seems to be very affirming. But there's a devil in the detail. The devil is always in the detail. Forgive me for using that antiquated language. If we're only looking at a nice guy that lived 2,000 years ago, okay. But if we're looking at something more illustrious, at the very least a prophet, and maybe at the very greatest something a great deal more, then it's an attack upon the transcendental element within the human condition itself. We're all just down here doing the best we can. Let's all chill out in the worst of all decadent senses and just do and say whatever we want to, because it doesn't matter, does it? Somebody said to me in the old Catholic tradition, remember at least half of my ordinations are old Catholic, why do you keep going on and on and on about the incarnation? Because that's something to do with our faith. If this nice guy was born in Israel 2,000 years ago, fine, and everybody loves that. The whole of secularized London loves the idea this nice guy was, hobbling around Judea 2,000 years ago. That's great. The minute you say there might be something more to it, and by the way, there might be morals that have some sort of grounding in the structure of human nature and in the cosmos itself, that no, it's not okay just to blow your opponents away. No, it's not okay to just declare war as and when you wish on your colleagues, on your neighbors, or, let it all hang out. I'll do what I want to do whenever I want to do it, which is the childish attitude of modern times. If there's something more and something more beautiful to human nature, like a transcendental principle that leads us to higher realities, then everything is simply not up for grabs. And, we must bear in mind symbols of the sacred, depictions of the sacred should actually be that, not politics in disguise. I don't know if you want to shout at me now, Leo.
No, absolutely. You're right. I mean, we are discussing also symbols of the sacred. So without even having to focus only on Jesus, but also going to talk, of course, of Judaism and so other kind of symbols. This seems to be, though, an attack, a constant attack on religious symbology. That is the problem here. It's like they want to affirm their liberalism is without a God. There is no God in their life. Roseanne, what do you think about that?
I'm still listening, so go to something else for now.
Lowell, you want to give us your Jewish perspective about this constant attack on the religious symbology, we can say?
I don't know, first of all, how to understand the term liberal. It says in the book of Isaiah, and I have to find the exact verse, the churlish man shall no longer be called liberal. I have to see exactly what the Hebrew is. So this term liberal, it's like a Halloween costume people put on to cover all sorts of other things. And I don't think it applies. Maybe 100 years ago, liberal, progressive, Eugene Debs, who was a socialist candidate, he got 1 million votes around World War I. Progressives, Fiorello LaGuardia, that meant something. It didn't necessarily mean something bad. Workers' rights, people's rights, social safety nets at a time when there were few, if any. Or Robert Owen at the beginning of the 1800s with his answer to the dark satanic mills, to convince his fellow industrialists with their mills, you don't have to torture and treat people like slaves and less than animals. And not only that, if you're nice to them, they'll even be more productive, so you'll make money. So you have no reason not to do it. So today, the term liberal in the Jewish community, I don't know what that means anymore. I don't think it means anything anymore. If you would ask the people who call themselves liberal, what do you mean? They probably couldn't answer, because people usually don't ask. What you mentioned about people using, remember, this also came up with someone who made a comment on Reverend David Williams' Facebook page. And I attacked him immediately, and he didn't talk back. He made these vague, it's always vague. When it's from the other side, what we would call the Sitra Achra, from the antimatter side, from the the realm of the black sun and the mountains of devastation of the Kabbalah, the accusations are usually vague. They're never specific. Whereas on our side, the patriots, we're specific. Lies have legs, and truths are stubborn things. I'm quoting one of the various sources I look at. So they make these vague comments, racism, sexism, anti-Semitism. But if you would ask them, what do you mean by that? They couldn't answer. They count on the fact that people usually don't ask. And for people who live in a kind of fuzzy world of fuzzy logic, no disrespect to real fuzzy logic and mathematics, which I don't understand, but I know is something serious, things are kept vague. This comes out in The Lord of the Rings when for a moment Sam puts on the ring. Frodo's been taken prisoner, and he puts on the ring. And he said two things happened right at once. Sound became sharpened. He could hear much clearer, but sight became vague. In the world of Sauron, the Dark Lord, sight became vague. So these people make these sweet, and they're basically contentless. Other people who don't think to question what do those multisyllabic meaningless words means, okay. And then when you question them, it all falls apart. We had recently, what was it? After President Trump moved the embassy in May 2018 from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, I met a rabbi I know, Jeff Seidel, who is always at the Western Wall and inviting people, finding them places for Shabbat for lunch and dinner. And he said, you know what happened? What? He said, one of the, I call them schlemiels in suits, the suits. The establishment Jewish organizations were having an annual meeting in Israel. And listen to this. This is out of Alice in Wonderland and the Queen saying 7 impossible things before breakfast. Or was it 6? John would know better than me. He knows all these sort of things.
That Roseanne wanted to intervene, though, Lowell, on your prior comment. Roseanne, please.
I just wanted to say that what a liberal and conservative originally meant in the United States politically was the interpretation of the Constitution. You either take a conservative approach or a liberal approach to interpreting the Constitution. So that's where it started. And now I we'll get into where it devolved, but that's what it originally meant in the United States.
Lowell, you wanted to finish up your thought that you were...
Yes, these what we would call the wise men of Chelm. Chelm is actually, it's a real place on the border of Ukraine and Poland at the moment, which is the subject of, even though it was a center for real sages in the traditional Jewish community, there are many stories that are told of the wise men of Chelm doing and saying unusual and peculiar things, which are considered quite funny. So what did these people do, Jeff Seidel said, to protest, in protest of President Trump moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem? They decided that they would move their annual conference from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. Now, I think we're talking about Jews, Jewish organizations. We're not talking about the enemy, the other side. No, you dared to move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That's it. We're not, something is really, as we would say in Hebrew, dafuk, wrong. There's a screw loose. Don't ask me to explain it. I don't know what it is. We can see this historically where people do and say things in the Jewish and Israeli community that don't make any sense.
I wanted to actually, Lowell, I wanted to actually ask, because, you know, there is liberal Jews that thought that Obama was actually the first Jewish president even. Yeah. And Obama was the guy who actually did less for Israel than anybody else. So, John, what's your idea regarding this?
Well, when you start looking at it and put it under a microscope, you know, a psychological microscope, you say, what's going on here? Who's leading this parade? Because really, if you go back to the book, the Lord of the Flies by William Golding, he's prize-winning, a Nobel Prize-winning author, and who was, I guess, a Waldorf teacher also. But that beside the point, because you see that the manipulation of behavior in there has to do with the creation of egregore to go get Piggy. Let's go get Piggy. And once you can get everybody responding to that, they want to be a part of that in-group. They want to be included. It's all about inclusion and not to be left on the outside. And that's the psychological game that they're playing here. And in order to do that, you kind of have to make sure that what you're working with is targeted. And so there's the weaponization of language, the weaponization of memes. Notice they only use pejorative terms. They always are into name calling, and they're trying to get your emotions all riled up. Why? Well, that's to prevent you from actually thinking about what they're saying, because if you start looking beneath the surface of what they're saying, they don't have really any genuine content there. And consequently, a lot of these people, if you ask them, well, what do you mean by that? They're taken aback because they can't explain what they mean. And so it's very troubling, because it's kind of this unconscious urge that's seeping out of this egregore, this group entity that has no face. It's just this kind of mass manipulation that's seething to the surface after so many decades and decades of being exposed to programming.
Right, exactly. And it's a weaponization of language also, and especially the use of code words. And, you can see that everywhere, the code words they use, and how it triggers people into, going back into their little cans that they have us all put in to fight against each other. It's a divide and conquer strategy of mind control.
Well, of course, divide and conquer strategy of mind control, but we also have, as I said from the start of the show, this constant need of destroying in some way religion per se. I mean, it seems like a world with no God will favor this kind of soylent green scenario of the future, because we are here, guys, in front of a scenario which is unprecedented. I saw, and I reported in my latest book, about a Jesuit priest who promoted euthanasia. And of course, what's your idea, guys, about euthanasia and about basically having the possibility of killing yourself? In some culture, it has been also brought together in a kind of honorable way, like in the Japanese culture. What's your idea about that, Reverend William?
Oh, gosh, I'm totally conflicted on the issue of euthanasia. My partner many years ago had testicular cancer and nearly died from it, and that issue was presented to us. Well, my stepfather was misdiagnosed in a London hospital a couple of years ago and passed very, very, very painfully and unfortunately. So it's been, and I'm not saying it was mentioned in his case, but when one is presented with painful departures, for me, the pastoral side of me isn't as firmly rooted in doctrine as maybe I would like, because human pain is human pain, and it's incredibly difficult to have a rule governing every single instance. I don't know. That's balanced against the fact a couple of years ago, I knew Lady Heel, who had this wonderful stately home in the British countryside. And I got chatting to her in the middle of the night. It was some sort of weekend soiree where everyone, dressed as sort of a film figure. I can't remember what I went as now. I think the Fat Man from one of the Carry On movies, I think. It goes with my frame. And we got chatting. We got chatting in the middle of the night, and she was sprightly. She was pushing numbers, but she was sprightly. She was funny. She was intelligent. And she was the hostess of the party, of course. And she suddenly looked very, very depressed and said, I've got to speak to you as someone who's clergy. And I said, well, I'm not sure it's the appropriate time and place, but I'm here. If you want us to have a chat together, let's have a chat. We went somewhere private outside of the party, which was everywhere in this wonderful country seat. And she said, I live a life of fear. And I said, I find that very difficult to believe. You're very comfortable, you're rich, you're powerful, you're very respected. And she said, I am. But sometimes I'm on the verge of getting vascular dementia. My family is trying to use that to have me sectioned and committed. And some of them are even talking about euthanasia if they get the chance. Because, of course, there's a great deal of money and property at stake here. I didn't know what to make of that story then. I don't know what to make of it now. So I'm conflicted on the issue of euthanasia. Is the church right about every single thing in every single way? No, it's not. The advice given to a second century Christian is not appropriate for the 21st century. But that doesn't mean everything it said previously is wrong or primitive or stupid or completely beyond the pale. But I just think nowadays in our current world where there is a way of gifting people a way out of intense physical pain, I don't know. I would argue against it with every fiber of my being, but I couldn't at the end of the day say no in every case.
Roseanne, your idea regarding this very delicate and controversial subject?
Well, I kind of feel like every human being should have the right to exit when it's terminal and they're in suffering and pain. I think that science should come to this century, and that it should be your right to choose that. If you're at a point in your life cycle where that you have no hope of reversing, where you're going to die, I don't think that you should have to be forced to go through weeks, days, even hours of needless suffering. So I think that's up to the person, and I think it's a great conversation, if nothing else. And I think that it should be dragged into the mainstream, and we should all examine it more closely, because anything that prolongs pain and suffering, to me, it isn't moral to me.
Lowell, in traditional Judaism, what's your point of view for this delicate subject?
Well, I can say what I learned from Mrs. Susan Rosenbluth, who is the editor of the Jewish Voice and Opinion in Teaneck, New Jersey. Her husband, Richie Rosenbluth, Dr. Richie Rosenbluth, is a doctor who specializes in geriatric medicine. And they are both traditionally religious Jews. And the last time I saw Susan, when I interviewed her for my YouTube channel with my partner in New York, Laura Ledbetter, after we interviewed Susan, he said, I need to talk to you too. We have a problem in the traditional Jewish community that the science outpaced Jewish law, and the Jewish law hasn't caught up with the science. We can keep people alive a little bit longer at tremendous cost, both to them as people, mentally and physically, as well as financially. And that's not a good idea. The old idea was you live until God takes you, and you shouldn't prolong suffering, but you shouldn't commit suicide or murder someone either. Moses says in Psalm 90 that in the world the way it is now, people live 70 or 80 years maximum. And after that, some people are blessed with very long life. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson both died at the age of 90, 50 years to the day from the signing of the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, whatever is 50 years later. And they lived long lives, and they were blessed with long lives with their faculties. My father lived at the Hebrew Home for the Aged in Riverdale from 2011 until the death of his body. I don't believe that souls die. That's why I say that. On October 16, 2018. And he was in pretty good condition up until the very end. I had an occasion to go into a unit of the Hebrew home where people were not in good condition. And then I saw what my mother was afraid about. And also my father was afraid about. He wanted to stay as long as he could, but he didn't want to get stuck in a no man's land where you've lost your body and your mind. So once I would go help them make a minyan, a quorum of 10 men at the synagogue in the Hebrew home. And one of the men was brought in a wheelchair to the synagogue. And they're always happy to have extra help. So they said, the staff, can you take him back to his unit? And I did. And I saw people where the bodies and the minds were mostly gone. Then I saw what my mother was worried about. My own personal view is that I hope to one day do that interview with Professor Richie Rosenbluth, where he's saying, rabbis, you got to catch up with the medicine because the medicine outran a little bit the Jewish law. We're in a no man's land where we haven't gotten to the point where we will at a certain point, according to Isaiah 65, verses 19 through 21 and other verses, where there really won't be any more sickness, aging, and death.
Right.
But at the moment, the science can barely, you can possibly extend a little bit at terrible cost. For myself, I wouldn't want that.
John, your point of view on this topic instead.
Well, it's a difficult subject. I mean, you could throw it in there with the concept of capital punishment, for example.
Yeah.
Gee, what if you made a mistake? Oops.
Yeah, it's open to, of course, being abused in every way possible by the New World Order and their agenda. So, well, is it something that you will open as a possibility, or you will restrict because it's too much open to abuse?
Well, if you remember, in Nazi Germany, they were planning on culling the population, and they actively pursued that. And they were getting rid of people that they consider to be mentally defect. It's a slippery slope. Once you open the door to the angel of death, a lot can pour through that door that you didn't intend in the first place. And I'm not comfortable with that. As far as the spiritual dimension of it, I'm not comfortable with the government intruding in the spiritual dimension and making proclamations one way or the other. That's another slippery slope. All these things are masquerades. You could think that it has an application in one sense, and before you know it, the lawyers get in there and something else is involved, and you've signed over the powers of attorney to your family, and they decide you're mentally defective and you should get out of here so they can speed up the inheritance. I mean, like what Reverend David was saying, you know, so there's all those issues. As far as capital punishment, Amanda Blavatsky way back in 1988 made reference to the increase in crime every time that they performed capital punishment, because the spirit of an evil individual is set loose to go and prey on other people and push them to do things they wouldn't do. That's from the occult angle. So I think the whole situation is very dicey. I think that you have a karmic debt that you are related to. But yes, I understand some of this medicine. Personally, with me, if they asked me if they wanted to give me something special to extend my stay here, I would say no. You know, just unplug me and let nature take its course.
The other danger that the risk of being misunderstood and dragging the conversation down, it also opens the door to horrendous abuses of art. I remember Yoko Ono singing Britain, you killed Han Ratty, and then she starts screaming for the next 2 minutes. I mean, heaven's sake, that must stop.
It was singing, not screaming.
Well,
No, I'm
Roseanne,
kidding.
you're just too perfect. I can't talk to you about that. It sounded a lot to these poor old ears like screaming.
Well, guys, I'm gonna soon open up also the call-in lines for our, of course, for our viewers. So there is a call-in number that I'm providing, and that is gonna be also so we can have a direct interaction with the viewers of the Pew. In the meantime, of course, we want to extend this discussion also in another element, always from Soylent Green. The fact everything in this modern society needs to be recycled. So at one point or the other, they might recycle human bodies for consumption in restaurants. Licensing now restaurants for the consumption of human flesh seems to be the latest fetish also of some very rich people. Roseanne, have you ever heard of that happening in your Hollywood milieu?
You mean, have I ever eaten human flesh?
I hope not.
No, I've never consumed human flesh. But yeah, I heard there was a cannibal restaurant in Hollywood or something. I don't know if it was true, but everybody was talking about it. And, you know, I saw the menu, and I mean, it's just disgusting of all the disgusting things they could come up with. That one is.
Yeah.
You know, but yet when you look at people and the way they run the world, it is kind of cannibalistic and vampiristic, isn't it? I mean, getting a payoff for destroying an entire community, how different is that from consuming? You know, I mean, it's all like morally connected, I think.
Now,
you know, I wanted to say, because I thought we were going to stay on the subject, and I thought about it all night, where you were talking about how they had offended Christians by
by putting Jesus with
by, you know, making the gay Jesus and all of that stuff that's abhorrent to, you know, most believers, as I can imagine. I'm not a Christian myself, but I can imagine how offensive that is to Christian people. But then you said that you thought after that people should attack or personify Muhammad in a
well, I mean, it is, of course, something that comes to mind. I mean, if they're doing it with Jesus, so let's do it with Muhammad and see what happens. And we know
I know, I understood that, but I thought, well, you really have to stay untriggered, because the fact is that it isn't Muslims that are doing that. So, you know, two wrongs don't make a right, and it's not Muslims that are, you know, personifying Jesus as a gay man. It isn't the Muslim people who are behind that. You know, it's the same people. And, you know, as Lowell and I have talked, and I really would want to get into the subject of, you know, a bunch of people who are hell-bent on destroying religion. And
we have actually a phone call, Roseanne, our first phone call here for the Pew. Who we have online, who we are talking to?
This is Q Hunter on your little chat thing, but my name's John.
Okay, John, do you have any questions for our eccentric panel of the Pew?
Well, I do. I have a quick statement and maybe it leads to a question. To what Roseanne was saying there, whenever they make these paintings and stuff about the gay Jesus and everything, you know, you can go back and look in the Bible, and it talks about all this stuff happening towards the end times and stuff. And I was wondering, you know, if your panel and stuff see that happening here within the last 20 years, a major speed up. I mean, I'm not talking about like a small speed up. It's been unbelievably, running forward. And I was wondering what their opinion is on that.
Yes, the question seems to be pretty much for the panel a question that concerns the end time scenario, basically. If we believe that this is connected with the end time scenario, do you believe that's the case, Roseanne?
Yeah, I do believe that. According to my religion, these are the last days, but we have to talk about the last days of what. So yes, I do believe that it's the end of a long, incorrect story that's centuries long, and I'm glad to see it go. I don't think it's the end of the world, like a lot of people do. I think it's the end of something bad and the beginning of a correction of the past, which I am, I rejoice in that, because I think that intelligence is descending to this plane or sphere, whatever you're going to call it, the world, and that it's for the betterment of all humanity.
Now, Roseanne, you were saying the Muslims are not responsible, but I want to bring you a few percentages here, actually, of data. This is hard evidence. Now, 3,000 churches that have been attacked in France in the last couple of years. The majority of people responsible for destroying, even in the Church of René Le Chateau, the image at the entrance, which could have been controversial. But I'm talking about a bunch of churches. Now, in the latest Christmas period in Italy, these Christmas, how you call them, Christmas ribs, the one that represent the family of Jesus, in Italy we call it presepe, destroyed methodically in every city in Italy, at one point even set on fire on the same night in Ivrea, two set of fire. The little baby Jesus beheaded, and when they went to discover who it was children, Muslims, young Muslims most of the times. In France the same. They don't seem to get integrated with the rest of our Western society. And this is a big, big problem, though, Roseanne. I mean, we have to face it. The Muslims might not be responsible, but if their children act like vandals against Jesus, they should remember that Jesus is in their holy book, the Quran. And in the end times, it's him who comes back and not Muhammad. Right.
Well, I think, there's a lot of different kinds of Muslims, and there's a lot of different kind of Christians and Jews too. And I think that that's what we need to narrow our conversation to. We need to be very, very specific. And there are evil people who want destruction for their own.
The lack of integration in our Western culture, I mean, this is a big problem, though. They come here, and instead of integrating and being thankful of being in America, of being in Europe, of being in countries that are doing far better than, sorry if I say that, shitholes in the Middle East, and I've been there myself, and I have been hanging out with Muslim people. I actually have my only son, which I don't see since the year 2008, is actually brought up and kidnapped by Muslims. So the problem here is that I saw with my own eyes these people talking about great things in interreligious events, saying that Islam is a religion of peace and all that. But why don't they come here in the West and integrate with us? And Reverend Perry is, of course, has a boyfriend who is Muslim himself, no? So you would like maybe to say a word about what I'm saying here, because I, of course, don't want to be misinterpreted, but I am kind of skeptic that this is a religion of peace, because we judge them by their deeds.
Well, we can say that about every religion,
Yes, sure.
We can say that there are some Jewish people who emigrate, and they don't. And in fact, this is one of the things that Hitler had against the Jews, that they don't, assimilate and integrate. And some don't, but they have, there's more than one kind, and some do come and assimilate and are good citizens. And in America right now, a woman from Iraq, I assume she's Muslim, is running against Ilhan Omar, and she's running as a Republican, so she's definitely assimilated to American law and culture. And the head of the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. is a wonderful Muslim woman who totally understands the plight of the Jewish people and Israel. And we have many Muslim friends, so I really want to be careful to make those kind of generalizations about people. But there are many different kinds, and so we have to talk about who are we speaking about specifically, because what's abhorrent to me is abhorrent to everybody. I mean, we all have that in common, and if I just don't see how you can divorce. Well, that's probably another whole subject, but the violence that done against the Muslim people in the Mideast that forced them to become refugees, we can't talk about that we can't talk about them without including that. So it's a huge subject, and everybody says there's the Wahhabi, the Shiite, the Sunni. So we can't just paint with such a broad brush. And there's also like renegade groups of every religion out there who just want to bring destruction on themselves and everybody else. And why? We have to talk about why and where do these ideas come from.
David, you want to add something to this?
Yeah, let's get back to the apocalypse for a minute. I remember Judy Garland singing "Hallelujah, come on, let's get happy, get ready for the judgment day." If it really is on its way, I hate to admit this, but all the signs are there. All the signs of the end times are there. Does the Bible speak about the end of the world? Rather like Roseanne, I'm not sure it does. It speaks about the end of a cycle. And, let's get happy. I mean, is this world so wonderful? We need to keep it the way it is? No, it's not. There's so much wrong with it. There's so much injustice. There's so much mindlessness. I'm getting happy at the thought of the judgment day. This hat, to move on topic, is actually from Central Asia. I do a lot of work with the Central Asians. I'm privileged in all sorts of ways to go over there frequently for arts and cultural events, conferences, and so on. This is actually a hat from Tajikistan, where there are types of Shia who hadn't even heard of jihad being declared against any other country. They used a completely different word. And they were phoning me up during the Paris attack a couple of years ago, asking me what was going on. And I said, look, this is an attack being made in the name of Islam. And they were totally shocked and appalled. And the basic question was, well, what are the authorities doing? Why aren't they doing more? And I was on the phone for about an hour trying to remember my schoolboy Russian and trying to translate into French in case they could do that too, about what politics was like in the West. What has a gentle Shia in Central Asia got to do with a rampant Salafist who wants most of Islam murdered at the same time as us? And I hate to sound like the ultimate whinging liberal. I mean, yes, that's part of my MO, and I admit it.
We have
the world isn't a simple place. The world is a simple place. We've just got to remember that. My other half is and Muslim.
We have a bit of technical problems from your side, David. Just a little cracks, but it should be fine, I hope.
Right. My other half is black and Muslim. Appalled. You have to think. Are they human beings or not? And are they just sleeping night to
Now, let me introduce you guys to a topic. As we are discussing this, I think we should discuss it. Then, of course, you're free to follow up, but then in the research of the topic that I'm gonna now present you. In the last month, well, in the last few weeks, actually, Netflix, aside from the gay Jesus thing, which of course was appalling, has brought together a TV series called Messiah. Now, I have analyzed the 10 episodes of this TV series, and of course, I invite all the people who are of all faiths, of course, interested in this topic to view this TV series, which has a lot of twists and turns. And at the end, I thought it was actually pushing for a world with no God, but suddenly it turns around and it surprises you. It is definitely an unusual kind of Messiah they want to push through. He is somebody who is kind of picks up this group of desperados in Syria, brings them all the way to the borders with Israel, attempts to enter Israel. He doesn't manage. This group stays for a few months while he suddenly appears in the middle of Texas. And then from there, he kind of seems to gather momentum, arrives in Washington, D.C., and as you will expect from a Jesus that, of course, is also depicted along the film on Jewish lines, saying that, you know, Jesus was a miracle worker, also used the illusion to gather followers. And this could be offensive, of course, but there is the involvement of Shin Bet in the movie. So you have the military arm of Jewish intelligence involved in this movie that appears involved. And so it is very interesting. And I'm going to actually play the trailer of this TV series. So for those who have not watched it, they can have a more clear idea of what I'm talking about. And here we go. It's basically...
What do we know about him? He's leading desperate people. So this is a cult? We don't know who he's associated with. He could be creating an army. Or he could be leading them to their death.
What are you doing in Syria? Delivering a message. A message from my father. And who is your father?
We've lost him.
What do you mean? He just disappears. No one just disappears.
We all witnessed a miracle.
He saved my daughter's life.
You need to see this.
Bury it for as long as you can. He didn't just click his heels and end up here. He clearly had help. You get around Syria, Israel, Texas.
It's the nature of my work.
And what is that work?
God's work.
Who do you think he is?
You didn't see what I saw.
And if I did, would I be calling him the second coming?
How far will this new movement spread? I'm going to find out everything about you.
This is bigger than what you can imagine.
So, ladies and gentlemen, from January 1st, Netflix has been pushing this. Your opinions, if you have seen it or you have not seen it. Let's start with Roseanne, Barr.
Well, I thought it's funny to say Syria, Egypt, and Texas. I think that's funny.
Well, it actually picks up from what you said earlier, though. The desperation created in the Middle East by wars facilitates the coming of this character who basically uses his faith and his powers to block ISIS from invading, I think it was the city of Aleppo, but I'm not sure now, in the first episode. And then he gradually gets called Messiah, and he brings this group of people right at the borders of Israel, where, of course, in turn, he creates really a lot of problems also, and sparks a whole new intifada. We are talking here not about the typical, Messiah that will come from the skies or stuff. He's actually a guy who, when the CIA goes and search for his origins, it eventually will show that he's actually of Jewish origins, but raised in Iran and in Iraq. So we are going right in the heart of the problem here, in the Middle East, with a subject which is very important. The Messiah will have to be recognized by Islam, by Israel, and by the Catholic Church. In fact, at one point during the TV series, the Vatican also gets involved in the whole matter. So, John, you want to also talk about this and your opinion?
Well, I haven't gotten around to watching that series, but if you look at this type of activity and what they do to attempt to undermine the spiritual foundations of the West, essentially, is what's going on. You could say it developed out of a man named Harnack back in the 19th century, who wrote a life of Jesus that was as if it was just like some guy who was really, really nice, And so they want to diminish the significance of religion in the world. Like, what are you doing going along with all this stuff? It's just some really nice guy. I mean, you could have said those things. It's like this whole any man thing that really ties into a collectivist narrative where we're just all here, and that whole impulse. If you notice, for our adult lives and before, there was this whole move spreading democracy around the world. Well, the United States is not a democracy. It's a constitutional republic.
Bingo.
Democracies, that's what got Socrates to take the hemlock, The best guy in the whole country has to take the hemlock. If Jesus came today, they'd probably, and so consequently, there's an echo anytime we get in.
Yes, I mean, there seems to be some technical problems.
I really wish we could really discuss Jesus and what was going on in Judea, time of his life, and what he really did and what he stood for. And that seems to be always censored, always.
Lowell, your opinion on what you saw, at least.
Am I getting an echo too?
No, you're fine.
Okay. Yeah, but I hear myself speak and then I hear an echo. I wonder why. But it stopped.
What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna mute all your microphones, guys, so while Lowell talks, so we see if we can avoid the echo.
When I saw the trailer that you just showed, and I read what you wrote me about it, first of all, based on what I've been learning from Alex Jones and others, I would never subscribe to Netflix. Is the new propaganda arm of the dying DC demons crap dementor deep state. It says unkosher. Now I hear an echo. As it goes. That's why I'm going to talk slowly, so that when the echo's finished, I'll continue. Let's go back a couple of hundred years. All right. Now, you have all written a number of books, which I have to buy. I don't want free copies and how much those cost, and I'm going to read them. Here's my one book, Cracking the Quran Code, God's Land, Torah, and People Covenants with Israel in the Quran and Islamic Tradition, written under the, what happened to Roseanne?
I'm right here getting my book.
Okay, what happened to Leo? Leo?
Uh-oh.
You don't see, Leo's not there all of a sudden.
Yes,
We're a bunch of bookies.
I've disappeared and I'm back now. I kind of
So
tried to see if I could
let's take this BS, that stands for Bachelor of Science, apart in just about 3 minutes. The most dangerous messianic figures of the last 400 years that I know of was Abdul Wahhab, the founder of the Wahhabi sect in 1750 of the Al Saud tribe. And in the 20th century, hey, that's good, Roseanne. Stalin, Hitler, and now. Those were real dangers. This is all nonsense for the masses coming right out of the very people who are the most dangerous of all. The dying deep states in Europe, England, the United States, the Anglo-Saxon countries, I'm sorry to say, our own, and what they are cooking up. Abdul Wahhab, founder of the Al Saud satanic murder, suicide, death cult, which has been the religion of that tribe for 250 years, made a pact with the British in the 1920s, who helped him throw the Hashemites out of Mecca and Medina in 1926. They were the good guys and lost. And by 1933, the Al Saud became the rulers of what is now known as Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, my foot. Now, the Wahhabis are to traditional Sunni Islam what the Frankists and the Sabbatians are to traditional Judaism. They are very dangerous. And the dying Anglo-American oil and banking establishment, and here's Carol Quigley's book, The Anglo-American Establishment. John mentioned his other book, the more well-known one, Tragedy and Hope, in a previous discussion, have used the Wahhabi worldwide networks as their stormtroopers for the last 70 years. The dying, oh good. I knew you would have it, but the only reason I have it is my Jedi master for 30 years was an OSS officer who joined the Marshall Fund plan, who became a senior economist specializing in the world oil industry at the World Bank in Washington in 1973, came to Israel, converted to Judaism, and spent 30 years telling me what he knew up front in person in Washington about how power flows at the very, very top. He says there's not that many people there. So the Wahhabis, what you mentioned about art, Muslim artists, to the extent there are Muslim artists, would never make disrespectful art about Jesus, Mary, or the family, which is who are themselves mentioned with great respect in the Quran. But the view of the Wahhabis is the same as the view as the Frankists and the Sabbatians of their other Jews. You can join us or we'll exterminate you. And they were quite happy to dance cheek to cheek with the Nazis, and in many ways were spiritual progenitors of the Nazis, who John mentioned this before, and they went to Turkey and they met the Sabbatians. If you're not going to join us, we're going to turn you into mass religious human sacrifice to our deity. The Wahhabi view is, and it's more lethal towards Sunnis and Shiites than it is to Hindus, Buddhists, Christians, and Jews. You can convert to become a Wahhabi, but if not, we can do anything we want to you. And they do. And these are these incidents, the beheadings, the slaughters. Who set up these networks? Ground zero, first of all, Wahhabis, as they are called by Sunnis and Shiites, call themselves Salafis, or, if you want to get jazzier, Ikhwans, the rabble of Bedouin raiders of the Al Saud who drove out with the anti-Jewish elements in British intelligence, the Bani Hashem, the Hashemites from Mecca and Medina in 1926, called themselves the Ikhwan. And the Wahhabis, as they are called by Sunnis and Shiites, call themselves Salafis, the friends of the Prophet in the early generation. They claim they're the true Islam. Nothing could be further from the truth from what I know from my Islamic sources. There are 1.1 billion Muslims in the world, more or less. 90% are Sunni, 10% are Shiite. And a fraction of the Sunnis are Wahhabis. Most of you are public faces of Islam, the mosques, the community groups in Europe, England, the United States are Wahhabis. The Council on American Islamic Relations has nothing to do with Islam. Sheikh Palazzi nicknamed them the Council on American Ikhwan Relations. It's a Wahhabi front group. The Muslim Brotherhood is the Wahhabi Murderhood. It's the sister organization of Al-Qaeda. Now, these guys at Netflix represent that old oil and banking establishment. ISIS, Shmisis, al-Baghdadi, Shmadi, that's not real. Ground zero for global Wahhabi mass murder mayhem is Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and the Gulf states, the business partners of the dying Anglo-American oil and banking establishment. So the subject, I don't want to go too much into it. You want a real satanic messianic figure who's real? Go back 250 years, and Wahhab's spirit has lost none of its potency just because his body is gone. As Saruman says to Gandalf, Sauron cannot yet take physical form, but his spirit has lost none of its potency. You want to go to you want to go to what they don't want the public to go, yeah, this little games, this someone, he comes from Syria, but he's really a Jew, and the Mossad gets involved. You want to go to real dangerous messianic figures? You can start with Adolf Hitler, the Amalekite Nazi German Messiah. You can start with Stalin, who many Jews in the Jewish world in Israel regarded as a Mashiach. Literally, the son of all the nations, they called him. Communism was their religion. He was their God-man. And now for the Chinese, these are real people who are really dangerous. There's little games playing with a little movie to distract a ignorant and impressionable public who would even look at Netflix from the real danger of what President Trump is destroying. Now let's get for a moment, and then I'll conclude, because this is not a place for monologue. What is President Trump destroying? This is not, as our team says, another 4-year election. President Trump has been tweeting for years, in America we don't serve state, the state we serve God. But he's tweeted more than that. He said, in America we believe in redemption.
Right.
What most people don't understand, certainly not in the Jewish or Israeli community, right up to the top, is President Trump sees himself, and many rabbis see him, as a kind of messianic figure with a mission from God to do what? Yes, he's going to put out of business the money laundering and crime syndicates in Washington, where the terms Republican and Democrat are meaningless, where Joe Biden and Michael and Barry and Michael Obama, you heard what I said, Barry and Michael Obama, the Siamese twins that are one person, Barry and Michael Obama. There's no Barack and there's no Michelle. That's not real. And all of these people, yeah, he's going to put them out of business. He's going to follow the money. He's going to follow the drugs. He's already doing it. That's what they're terrified of. This isn't about Democrats, Republicans. He'll do all of that. But behind that, there's more than that. Behind that, there's more that follow the money, follow the drugs, follow the weapons, follow the bodies, the body parts. Then you get to the real nasty stuff. And the real nasty stuff, what's his name? Waters from Fox News was hinting at it when he interviewed someone about QAnon. And Waters, whatever his name is, Jesse Waters.
Yeah.
The only way he could present this and get away with it was to make it sound like, isn't that cute, isn't that funny? He said, there are people in the QAnon community who believe that there are satanic networks in Washington and they engage in human sacrifice. That actually is true. And as one of the demons says to the other demons in Out of the Silent Planet, or one of the C.S. Lewis's books, Screw Tape says to Wormwood, it's very easy to do what we have to do because nobody believes we exist. So let me stop there.
Let me interrupt you a second because we have.
I want to stop there.
Okay. We have a phone call. Who is on the line? Hello. Hello. Yes.
Hello,
who I'm talking?
Hi, Leo. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Who am I talking to?
My name is Kurt. I'm from the North Dallas, Texas area.
Okay.
Texas.
What the last gentleman was saying, I totally agree with him. If you do some serious study on Obama, it was very well known that he was a gay man that hung out in the Chicago public bathhouses in his younger days. It's a very well-known fact. Right. If you study the church that he went to, the Down Low Club, which was created by Reverend Wright's church, he did arranged marriages for these people. Those children are not the Obama's children, and what he is saying is exactly right. If you remember, Joan Rivers called it out before she was died on the operating table. She said Michael was a tranny.
Yeah, well, there is this controversy going on. I don't know if Roseanne wants to talk about that, but Michael, also in some very old photos, looks pretty much like a boy.
Well, I don't know about. I don't really have an opinion on that because I feel like all of that stuff is just distraction. Yeah. And which I really hope that today we could get to the singularity of it all, because there is a common thread running through all of it. And, I think it's biblical. And, I'd like to talk about that, about who really is doing this and for what reason. And so I don't think anybody, I don't really know what's true anymore. I don't know. But, I do know that everybody thinks it's okay to slime everybody, and that takes the place of reality. But we really need to look at the work of people's hands, the things they do in the world, rather than what everybody's impressions or perceptions of them.
Exactly.
I think we should stick to facts.
If you remember when Chris Kyle, the American sniper, died, he put up the gay symbol on the White House, and we had to scream and yell for him to fly the flag in half-mast for American sniper Chris Kyle. I remember that vividly. Also, if you remember in the scriptures, it states that the rainbow was God's sign that he would never flood the earth again. That further angers me. Why would they use the rainbow colors for their symbol?
Well, I think that I understand what you mean, but we have to be very careful here because it's definitely true that there is large parts of the LGBTQ community that are supporting the liberal agenda, and we can't deny that. But there is also some conservative gay men who are doing the opposite. So the problem here is why the majority of people from the LGBTQ community are endorsing these liberal policies that in the end will actually come back against them, because the liberals are the ones who are supporting these Islamic invasions from countries in which gay people are thrown off roofs, killed in the worst ways possible. So, I mean...
I call it lemming programming, and I think that we're all under that. We're all, everybody's being blocked from looking at the long-term vision and the long-term damage that these quote liberal, because they're not really liberal at all, because liberal implies tolerant and fluid and accepting and things like that, none of which they are. But we really have to look at where the end game results with all of those philosophies. And I really like to get to that because as I talk to Lowell and everybody else, there is a term for it, and hardly anybody knows, and that term is Erev Rav, and that is a kind of an infection in the human mind and the human soul. If we're really going to talk about theology and those kind of things, it is the opponent of peace and love and humanity. And I really would like to get to that, because it is the Erev Rav themselves that are behind everything that is happening in the world, everything that is
Roseanne, we have
divides us, everything that destroys us. There's a small, well, I don't know how small they are, because it also infects all of us. It's a mind control program, and lemming mind control programming, where you just go jump off a cliff because, you know, everybody else is doing it. There's no thinking, there's no free thought, there's no reaching out and dialoguing, because dialogue is the enemy of fascists. And so I'd really like to go, I'd really like to get deeper with it rather than
sure. We actually have the first female caller that is calling us, I don't know from where. Hello, where are you calling us from?
Hi, my name's Barr. I'm calling you from Canada.
Hi, Barb.
I just was wondering, like, if you take a look around the whole planet, it just seems like everybody's in chaos. And it's kind of been my understanding in some of the research that I've done that it's each government has their political power that they want for themselves, but there's always somebody above them pulling the strings, right? So that includes like the Vatican, I guess. They're probably the ones pulling the strings. Would that be right?
Well, there is a number of actors who are pulling the strings. Who do you think pulls the strings, Roseanne? And then we can do the same questions to the whole panel. So,
you understand what I'm asking, right?
yeah, sure. I would like, first of all, let's ask one at a time, the members of the panel, who they think is really pulling the strings of all this.
I think that it's the aristocrats.
The aristocracy.
The aristocracy that's always, you know, these things of divide and conquer are their tools. And that's what they've always used for centuries, and it still works, unfortunately, because nobody's able to free their mind from the mind control programming that's, you know, forced down their throats since the day they're born.
Lowell, who is behind the strings of all this dementia?
I agree with Roseanne. This is a subject that we discussed in the previous programs. We would call it, in the traditional Jewish community thinking, in our tradition, the mixed multitude Erev, it's long, mixed multitude Erev Rav, Sitra Achra, that's the satanic, Franca Sabbatians, and in their latest form, Labor Zionist. So that's in the Jewish community. Let's go back 6,000 years ago to Adam, Eve, and the Satan in the Garden of Eden, where the whole mess started. And then go to Cain, who murders his brother, and Cain's descendants, Lamech, who says, well, he murdered seven, I murdered my 77, not to check the verse. This has continued till today through kings and aristocrats, as Roseanne mentions, the Nimrods and pharaohs of our fallen world. Now you have two choices. As John sent me something very inspiring about Cyrus and his universal vision. The Achaemenids, the lovers of mankind dynasty, who believed in one God. According to our tradition, Cyrus was the son of Queen Esther and King Ahasuerus. And the very last words of the Hebrew Bible, in our Bible, in the book of Chronicles, in the Christian Bible, the order is changed to lead up to the Greek Testament, so it ends with Malachi and a prophecy of doom. But in the Hebrew Bible, it ends with Chronicles and a decree of hope, where Cyrus says, God gave me all the kingdoms of the world and has commanded me to build him a house in Jerusalem. All of his people who are out there, let them go up. Lalot. The last words are about going up, about something positive and redemptive. Go up and build a second temple. Now it's time to build a third temple. Now, there are rulers who fear God, like the first Pharaoh who welcomed Joseph, like Cyrus, like Ashoka, the good Indian emperor, good King Wenceslaus. There's so few of them in every country. Good King Alfred, good Queen Bess. There's so few of them. We remember them thousands of years later who didn't devote themselves to theft, murder, and rape. That's the bottom line. You have a ruler. You have the king. You have the aristocrats. You have the priestly class. You have the warriors. You have the muscle. And the money. Control that. This is what's going down now. President Trump.
This is what Trump is taking on.
He's an American Moses. And around the world, because it's, in our view, the new beginning of days, the Acharit Yamim, the beginning of, in our teachings, the Messianic era, there are Moses-like figures arising in every country. Who, that doesn't mean they're perfect, whatever perfect means. It means they recognize there's a creator and a moral order. I cannot name them. Jair Messias Bolsonaro in Brazil. Jair is a biblical figure, Messias Messiah. That's one. President Donald John Trump in the United States. Boris Johnson in England. Vladimir Putin.
Sa'ar in Israel.
What?
Gideon Sa'ar in Israel.
I was going to get to that last. So we go to Russia. You have Viktor Orban in Hungary, Sebastian Kurz in Austria, Salvini in Italy, and there are others, Modi in India. These are people who are very friendly to traditional Jewish teachings. There's a God, there's a moral order, and they want to work together with President Trump to take control of the economies, destroy the central banks, no more debt, because that's how they get you. Control the weapons and control the money, debt, interest. And tomorrow, Monday, January 20th, you have the Second Amendment rally in Virginia. It's all about weapons.
That is actually something that I wanted to discuss as a next topic. So I want to, before we go there, because that's very important, and it might be the start of a new civil war if they're not cautious and they don't take care of the situation which is unfolding tomorrow. During I wanted to pass to John the question, who do you think is pulling the strings behind this during this Messianic era? Who is really pulling the strings?
Well, in this current phase of globalism, when President Trump says, Americanism, not globalism, this is the crowd he's referring to. They have a name. They're called the Pilgrims Society. They were founded in London in 1909, had their first meeting in the United States at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel soon after. And it's an organization composed of invitation-only people who get to sit down and have tea with the Queen and hobnob with the rich and powerful. That's the Anglo-American arm of it that has a very cozy relationship to the Greek societies at universities, such Skull and Bones, Scroll and Key Society, all these groups. It's a pretty big group, and you're not in it. And it also has its close relationship to the Club of Rome, which is very significant regarding this. And there's various similar type societies. I mean, if you look at the Royal Institute of International Affairs, for example, in the UK, well, there's also a Pakistan Institute of International Affairs. What's up with that? I mean, Pakistan is like arms shipment central for much of the nefarious dealings that are going on in the world. So we've done a specific and detailed study of these types of organizations with primary documentation over at American Intelligence Media and Americans for Innovation. Anybody who wants to dig deeper can go there, and you can look at their printed materials where they brag about what they wish to do, where they had the Imperial Press conference in the early parts of the 20th century, where they decided that they were going to take a hold of the propaganda. And so you had 650 journalists from all over the world meeting there, and with major newspapers, the Chicago Tribune, the New York Times, the Washington Post, all represented there as to how they were going to be able to commandeer the narrative. That's your group, but the center of that group is the Pilgrim Society, and the center of the Pilgrim Society, there's
but John,
of Sabbateans, the Sabbatian Nazis.
Yes, Sabbatean Frankists, and of course we have the Jesuits in the Vatican who are also in control. They are placed their own pope, and they are guiding very fast towards a one-world religion that wants to be all-inclusive, but it's all about bringing us to a one-world government aside with a one-world government of religions, it seems. David, who you think is pulling the strings?
Oh, I mean, I'm not
aside when you're Queen of England.
I mean, I'm not a conspiracy boy. You all know that, and you're all experts in this field much more than me. But that doesn't mean I don't think there are conspiracies. Who are the conspirators? The Windsors. Some of the biggest crooks on the planet, the Windsors. The landed gentry in this country. Roseanne scored a bullseye. Why would American policies never work here? The poorest kid in the block can never dream of growing up and being the president. He will never be the president because there isn't one. He will never be the sovereign because we've got royal lines. He will never be an aristocrat because we've got landed gentry. Stay poor and get on with it. You know, who are the conspirators? But we know them. The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, J.P. Morgan, and all. We know who they are. You know, my trouble with David Icke, and I've got to be a bit careful because I used to be a director with art at the People's Voice. The People's Voice was a very interesting project. But, you know, is it these bloody lizards behind it all? No, it's human beings. It's human beings. Isn't that terrible? You know, human beings are making their prisons and their hells, and they're quite happy to go along with it. We know the conspirators. I'm trying to find something my brother sent me the other day. Do indulge me for 1 minute. Here it is. I mean, he's a young executive for Young and Rubicam, and he's very interested in end-time prophecy. And he sent me this the other day knowingly. Amazon.com Incorporated is planning to create terminals which would allow customers to make payments in store with a wave of the hand. Dow Jones report citing people familiar with the matter. The company plans to pitch the terminals to coffee shops, fast food restaurants, and other merchants, and has recently begun working with Visa Inc. According to the report, Amazon is also in discussions with MasterCard Inc., and several card issuers have expressed interest in the project, including JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo. Who are the conspirators? I've just named them. We don't need to worry about intergalactic lizards. You know, what we've got to worry about, and they needn't even put their hands in their pockets. We're doing it all for them. You know, we've got to stop. What are there? Transdimensional dark demonic powers? Yes. Is there a God who is sovereign of all? Yes. Is there a moral order which we are duty bound, because it's highly complex, to try and understand in our hearts and our minds? Yes. But these are not the people who are representing us, and these are not the people who are governing us. And the conspirators aren't even bothering to hide in the shadows anymore. They're taking center stage, they're rubbing it in our faces, and they no longer care. That's my worry about the conspiracy community. Let's look at home.
Roseanne, you wanted to say?
I would say that it's much simpler than any of that. I would say that the center of everything is, you know, the central bank of all central banks is called the Bank of International Settlements in Bern, Switzerland, and it owns every penny on the earth. and it controls every penny on the earth. And believe me, it's got books that account for every penny on the earth too. It decides what wars will be fought, what nations will be destroyed. It decides everything, and it is a whole system of economics, and economics is the master science. So, it decides all of that. So I think that we're smart when we put aside all of these conspiracies and look at the real thing. You just follow the money. It tells us everything we need to know. We don't need to go off on reptile tangents and all of this other stuff. We just need to go to the singularity of the whole system, which is corrupt and, based on theft and debt slavery. And it's right there in front of our face, and nobody ever mentions it. Instead, they always mention the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. Well, they work for the central bank. They work for people who don't work. So I think that we really need to stay there and stop being so distracted and easily led. And I really thought today we will really get into that and what the keystone of the whole thing is. And I think people should also investigate Octagon. And the more you study that, the clearer things get. They want to keep their money. It's that simple.
Well, we definitely have a lot of material here. We could go on, I guess, for another few hours with this topic, but I would like to include before the end of the show today a discussion on the other important topic that might really spark the next civil war, which is the rally that is taking place in Virginia tomorrow. As we all know, the Democrats have taken back political control of Virginia, and they're going for your guns. And that means that basically tomorrow for this pro-gun rally, there is a lot of expectations. And of course, there's a lot of infiltrations. There is all these white supremacist groups. There is all kinds of people that are gathering in what might be really, if unchecked, the start of a civil war. So it's obvious that the situation is very tense here in the United States. It's very tense, and there is very much a division that has never been seen in recent history. A division even within lodges of Freemasonry. There is now the more conservative ones that are pro-Trump, and the ones who are completely against Trump, and Freemasonry hasn't been divided like this since the Civil War. So what is your view about what's going to happen in Virginia tomorrow, and what is happening? Because we know also that, of course, the Virginia governor is no friend of Trump, but is also no friend of the Second Amendment, which, of course, is very important in America, because the right of carrying weapons, of having your own firearms, should not be infringed. Roseanne, Barr, on this topic.
Well, I think, because I talked to a lot of people, and what I could glean from the whole thing is that the producers of this TV show that's going to go on in Virginia,
TV show?
Yeah.
Okay.
The producers of it, they've hired a lot of extras, to pay for their ninja costumes and such. And
so are Antifa are the ones who are going to be appearing in this new movie?
Yeah, I think they're extras in their ninja costumes, and I don't think that they really, like most Hollywood producers, they don't really care about the safety of the actors or the extras at all, because why would they have them be in a circle-shaped pen where the production is going to take place with only one exit? And so what they've done now, I think that it's to create. I think the whole thing is kind of scripted, and that it's to create footage for certain fake news shows, networks. And so now their latest thing is that you can't you can't bring your guns to a rally that's about being able to bear arms in an open carry state. But they've got everybody, the producers have everybody in a big circle with one exit, which is very dangerous. And producers seem to always forget about the safety of the actors. And so I just think everybody should stay home, because I think it's like scripted, and you're going to be forced to play a part that you don't, a role that you don't really want to play. This is just like a fake news event, and I think everybody should stay home, because I think that it's, like I say, it's scripted, and I can see it's like everything else. It's just to embarrass the president and provoke people to, negative action against each other on both sides, the ninja folk and the firearm folk. Somebody's going to get hurt. You don't know what people are wearing under their outfits and their costumes. And, it's just fake. And I think people can do better by staying home and being keyboard warriors. I think that's our effective tool against this kind of stuff. I don't want to see any violence or anybody be hurt or anybody to be have their lemming programming activated. And that's what it seems like to me. And remember, the governor is known for wearing blackface. So I think that pretty well sums up a lot. And I think I just hope people stay home and don't let themselves be used.
Thank you so much, Roseanne, for this take that, of course, might positively affect the people out there who maybe are misled and want to participate to something they perceive as the start of a coming revolution. We know, though, that tension is building in the United States, and we know that Virginia traditionally has sparked the original Civil War. So what's your take, Lowell, on far from all this down in Israel?
I agree with everything Roseanne said. I'd also like to remind people that tomorrow are three. What do you say?
Martin Luther King Day.
Right. Tomorrow is Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Day. And Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, one of his famous statements was, when you say Zionist, you mean Jew. Now, as my father would say, hard cases make bad law, and theoretically, can you have people, especially in the religious Jewish community, that no, we're not Zionists, we're Jews? That's true. But in general, Dr. Martin Luther King, speaking to people in his own world, said, when you say Zionist, you mean Jew.
Absolutely.
Right, so it's Martin Luther King Day. It's also the 78th anniversary of the Wannsee Conference in Großen Wannsee Villa in Berlin, where, under the leadership of SS Obergruppenführer Reinhard Heydrich, director of the Reich Main Security Office, the formal plans for the extermination of all the Jews the Nazis could get their hands on was formalized. It was made halacha, as in law. That had never happened before. Reinhard Heydrich was himself assassinated in Prague on June 4th, 1942, by British agents. His full name was Reinhard Tristan Eugen Heydrich. His father was actually a Jew named Weiss. It's claimed that's not true, but it is true. And this also relates to Suleimani Solomon.
It also relates to Arab Rav.
Yes. People who hate Jews in Israel, who are of partial Jewish extraction, that can go in many directions. It can lead people to say, well, that's wonderful, I want to know more. It can also lead to self-hatred and revulsion. That was certainly the case with Suleimani and certainly the case with Hydra. So there's a lot going on tomorrow. Now let's get to Governor Ralph Shearer Northam. Let's remember that this is Dr. Death. This is the Virginian Dr. Mengele, who said, and he got caught and he tried to backtrack on it, that we can murder babies after they're born. Let's repeat that in the issue of abortion, we'll keep them comfortable, and after they're born, we can murder them. Now, this gets back to the big agenda of global reducing global populations, but doing it in the form of ritual satanic sacrifices, not simply just excess population disposal. And this gets back to the deeper esoteric and occult teachings of the groups. I'm not familiar exactly with what the Pilgrim Society and the Anglo-American establishment teaches, but I know that many of the ideas of the Nazis came from the Anglo-American occultists of the late 1880s. And anyway, we can trace it all back to Satan, his fallen angels and demons in the Garden of Eden, if you really want to go back to the source. So, but this is a scripted Reichstag fire false flag event. Absolutely. They are the bad guys are desperate because they know not only is President Trump going to win a landslide in 2020 in November, and our side is already working on dealing with the problem with the phony voting machines and millions of dead people on the rolls. They're desperate. They are losing at every turn. They need to create phony incidents, Russian collusion, Ukraine collusion. They need to make up something to disrupt the news cycle as the patriots are slowly educating the public to what the bad guys, just how bad they are. So tomorrow, yes, and they did the same thing in Charlotte 2 years ago where people were let out one door. And Antifa, George Soros, his name isn't Soros, his name is Schwartz. George Schwartz, the family changed its name to Soros in the 1930s, is, just go to look at Wikipedia. He himself says, I'm from a family of self-hating Jews. My dad and I were self-hating Jews. This is a man whose morality was, when he was interviewed by Leslie Stahl for whoever it was for 60 Minutes, and he tried to get it off the internet, he was asked why you went out with your host to collect Jewish property. Listen to this man's answer. Well, if I wasn't going to do it, somebody else was. It was one of the greatest days of my life. This is a man, again, Alice in Wonderland and saying, or doing 6 impossible or 7 impossible things before breakfast, said, well, we make money immorally so we can spend it morally. Come again? So this is a man who, in his terrestrial human body, is approaching the gateway to the other worlds, could repent, but shows no sign of doing so, as David Rockefeller didn't till the last minute. These people don't repent. I agree with Roseanne. The best is stay home. You're being manipulated. An event will be created. The Antifa, what is Antifa? George Schwartz, in parentheses, Soros. It's his Sturmabteilung. It's his street thugs. Why he's permitted to get away with it, why he isn't arrested today, I don't know. I think the reason is that President Trump and the Patriots, first of all, the real power is with President Trump and the Patriots. Our team, if you get right down to brass tacks, I don't know where that expression came from, has the money.
But Lowell,
the weapons.
That's what we were talking about in the beginning. So to tie it back, we're talking about, the internalized enemy. Aren't we talking about that? The enemy of all religions, and it's right. Internalized.
These groups, there is no one protocols of the Elders of Zion or the Pilgrim Society meeting on a mountaintop in northern Russia or somewhere that controls everything. My teacher, who in many ways, as I'm learning to know John better, John Charles Lincoln Hulley, a little book we published by him 20 years ago, that's what John looked like there. What you're talking about, I learned about from him because he was from the Anglo-American aristocracy. One ancestor got off the second ship after the Mayflower. He's descended from the Tudor kings of England. And he said, we're not very nice people at the top. In my circles, like, we're horrible people. There are exceptions, but we're awful people. And I said, John, what do people in your world at the very top want? What about all these satanic societies and the Bilderbergs and the Bohemian Grove? He said, I can only tell you what I know from what I've seen. I've read that stuff too. He said, the bottom line in our religion, rule number 1 of the first commandment, second and 10th commandment, get the money. Get the money. As Roseanne said, Bank for International Settlements, now called the World Bank.
Yeah, well, when it comes to money,
get the money.
I would like to invite our viewers to give us a donation so we can keep on. There is, of course, our links which are provided for Reverend David Perry, of course, for John Barnwell, and we have also books. We have also books that will bring you some knowledge. This latest one here also includes a very interesting part about the Sabbatean Frankist connection with the Jesuits and their various agents, and of course how Ignatian spirituality has been used to mold and craft the elite through their schools and so on. John, you wanted to tell us something before we leave our audience today after this excellent first show of the Pew. And Roseanne,
can I say one thing really quick?
Please.
Get my book.
Okay. Show us your book.
I wrote this book, Anarchy, Dispatches from the Nut Farm, and it is about how to kill Satan. This book is how to kill Satan. This book is being highly censored and nobody gets it, but I think that I just wrote it 12 years early. But anyway, this is about the internal programming that you've swallowed since you were born. That's lemming programming. That is the internal enemy that they shove down our throats to destroy us and our connection to God. And so I would say this is a really good book for the time. Thank you.
Good. Oh, thank you, Roseanne. So we have great authors here. Lowell, of course, has his own book, which he has shown. David Perry, do you have handy your latest book about Mount Athos inside you?
Mount Athos inside me, essays on religion, Swedenborg and arts. Cheap at the price, £16, I believe. I will do anything to help promote it shamelessly. Of course,
I love Swedenborg.
Oh, I mean, he's just such a phenomenon, Roseanne. You know, writing 30 years on visionary experiences as a fully trained scholar. You know, a unique phenomena. Just let me say one thing quickly, Leo. I think Roseanne is entirely right. I mean, I mention those groups because everyone has me down as a non-conspiracy boy. I'm not. But even though I think we're looking at conspiratorial players, Roseanne is absolutely correct. We mustn't take our eyes off the secret source, the shadowy, spectral Swiss presence that hides behind it all. I have friends that went to Davos recently. And
I can't wait for Davos. We got to do a whole show on Davos.
Yes, that's going to be about Davos, Greta Thunberg, and her confrontation with Trump. Definitely.
Well, I mean, some of the things that were going on at Davos are absolutely beg a description. You know, we really do need a show on that because it's terrifying what the moneyed classes think they can do and get away with. It really is.
And in the 1 week, of course, we're going to have the Day of Memory, the Holocaust Day of Memory. So that's also something that we're going to be discussing next week at the Pew. John, you also have some great books full of knowledge, and you can, of course, present them to our audience because it's always good to remind them of your great work as an esoteric writer.
Well, yeah, my books can be found on eBay under my name, John Barnwell, The Arcana of the Grail Angel and The Arcana of Light on the Path. But I wanted to put in my comment that got just getting started here. If you look at this whole concept of the elites and you look at the United States, you say, well, what is the nest of elite activity in the United States? And going all the way back to the colonies. Virginia is the place where you have the old landed gentry, as Reverend Dave likes to refer to them. That's the nest. And it happens to be conveniently located right next to Washington. And before Trump really got going with his campaign, I was in conversation with a friend of mine who was involved in helping trace down child trafficking. And I came across information that were the actual figures of missing children in the United States. And number one, of course, is California. It's the most populated state. The number two state for missing children is Virginia, which is like shocking, because why Virginia? It's like population-wise somewhere in the middle as far as all the other states, and yet it has the second highest number of missing children. And so it could have something to do with proximity to Washington and the concentration of elite associations that have been there as long as this country's been around. I mean, you tell me, why would that be? You know, there is no other explanation for this in my mind. And so this is something that we have to just keep moving on, and people are gradually waking it up. It is the Sabbatean problem. It is the archons, the supersensible influence, the Arv Rav, Samik Mem, and Kabbalah. They say to avoid having to say the name of Satan or Shaitan, you know, but it's this satanic thing, this satanic hub of elite organizations that preceded Christianity and persists to this day. And it's so unspeakable that people don't want to speak about it. They want to like blot it out. Oh, why would they do that?
Well, they're trained to not see it too, through mind control.
Yeah, they're trained to be lemmings, you know, but the point is that there really are such things, and that it's been turned around. And so now they're on the radar and people are waking up. And as far as tomorrow, this is like a last ditch show for them to be able to create chaos. Remember the Civil War, Virginia was very key. The Revolutionary War, Virginia was very key. The loyalists to the king, the highest concentration was in Virginia. The people of the elite families in the United States think that they live in a higher atmosphere, just like in the UK, and they're kind of envious of that situation and would love to be able to have a neo-feudalist system asserted into the United States.
Thank you, John. And I would like to conclude this first episode of The Pew with Reverend David Perry reciting a prayer for all of us, and so we can conduce the termination of our works with a holy moment. Of course, Rosanna, you want to tell us?
I'd like to offer a prayer too. I'll be very brief.
Okay.
I would like to pray that intelligence pierces through the veil of BS that's been knit into us and knit over our heads and over our eyes, but that the highest form of the intelligence of God that is present in this realm pierces that veil and wakes everybody up and brings us to the knowledge that all we have is each other. And the more we love each other and the more we speak with respect to each other, the faster the evil will dissipate. Amen.
Amen.
Amen to that. And please, Perry, end up with your prayer.
Father, Mother God, may truth prevail, may love succeed, and wisdom guide our affairs this day and always. In the name of the prophets of humanity. Amen.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. This was the first episode of the Pew. The Pew. And I hope you all enjoyed it, and God bless you all.
Have a good day, guys.
Take care.
Back to cleaning.